Good evening and welcome to a very special evening. We are here for the NIIT Imperial Leadership Series seminar, and we have with us a very eminent professor, a very eminent speaker, Dr. Amit Kapoor. In a short while, I'll be sharing with you a few details about Dr. Kapoor, though I'm sure many of you would already have read about him or read his profile, and indeed many of us would have seen this cover piece of work that he generated just about a month ago, which generated a lot of excitement all over. But first, a few hygiene announcements, something that we will need to make this seminar a successful one. Remember, we are in the Imperial setup, which means this is designed to be an interactive seminar. At any stage, please feel free to ask questions or queries of the professor. My suggestion is that if there are questions which are in the nature of a clarification to what he is speaking about, please do so right there and then. If there are other issues that you would want him to comment on or reflect on, it may be better to save it till the end of the seminar. How do we do this? I'm sure the mechanism for using these contraptions efficiently has already been explained to you in your respective classrooms. As you are viewing me and as you'll be viewing Dr. Kapoor, you'll be seeing us on a full screen mode. To ask a question, you'll just have to press escape on your keyboards, so it will move into a smaller mode. And thereafter, you have a raise hand icon at the top of your screens. There's a raise hand icon at the top of your screens. To click on the raise hand icon, and as you click on it, there'll be a screen which will appear for you. Please do type in your name, and then with a colon thereafter, whatever is your comment or your question. Should you need any help in this, the local staff will be more than happy to show you and tell you exactly how this is done. So do remember, use the raise hand icon at the top of your screens. If the icons are not visible because the speaker is on a full screen kind of mode, you need to press the escape key to make it visible. Thereafter, once you've clicked on the raise hand icon, type in first your name. That allows us to know who is asking the query or is making a particular comment, and thereafter type in your comment and query. There will be times when Dr. Kapoor will be putting you on air and you will be visible to all the rest of the seminar participants, of which we have 152 logged in nationwide at this particular point in time. There are other queries which he may prefer to read off the screen and comment on them or address them in the interest of the smooth running of this particular seminar. So that is so much about some of the basics that we need to follow as part of this particular seminar series, and there are many of you for whom it may be a first experience of coming on board. We have a query coming in from Bhubaneswar, and we'll just read off what that is. Can you see what's the query from Bhubaneswar, please? Yeah. Santosh, somebody's typed out, yes, Santosh, you are there, so we know you are there as Sarveshwar Panda. So that's the way you do it. Once you put in your name, and so we know which location you are from, just your name. Thereafter, please feel free to type in your query as explicitly as you wish. All right, before I hand you over to Dr. Amit Kapoor, which is the person all of you have gathered to listen to and interact with and ask him your queries and share his reflections. An eminent scholar, he's a PhD in industrial economics and business strategy. He's an affiliate faculty for the microeconomics of competitiveness course at the prestigious Harvard Business School, where he teaches alongside some very, very eminent names and the strategy gurus of the times of Michael Porter. He's the honorary chairman of the Institute of Competitiveness in India, as well as a regular columnist in all the business magazines, leading newspapers, as well as a very popular personality on the television talk shows. So without further ado, let us learn the tips tools and tricks about innovation in the midst of uncertainty. Over to you, Dr. Amit Kapoor.
Thank you, Shaman. Thanks a lot for this opportunity. In fact, what I'm going to do today is that I'll speak for about 45 minutes, and I'll share my ideas and views on what is innovation and what I fundamentally believe is innovation all about. But primarily because I come from a very interesting background where we actually ask a lot of questions, so I'll have a lot of queries from all the participants here today, and they could actually intervene and so on and so forth. It's typically going to be a classroom discussion kind of situation wherein we are actually going to engage together and we are going to learn together. So if you really look at the idea of innovation, in fact, like a lot of people have been talking about it in the last 15-20 years, and it started with the idea of a person called Schumpeter, who actually gave this idea of innovation and creative destruction, and he said like it's the innovation which drives wealth creation. I fundamentally believe in this idea that it is innovation which drives wealth creation. In fact, if you really look at the history of the world, and at least for the last 300 years, and how wealth has actually got created, you would actually see something very interesting, and how wealth creation happened, how entrepreneurship happened, and how new business models got created, and how the world got richer over a period of time. In fact, the most interesting thing that actually happened in the past was something called the steam engine revolution. And it was the United States, probably like the European region, and every other place in the world, which is like the first world today. It started with the steam engine revolution. We had something called the Industrial Revolution, and then of course we moved to the mass production era, we moved to the computers, we moved to internet, and now we are really talking about nanotechnology. So if you really look at it, it's innovation which drives wealth creation. And in fact, all these points have actually been punctuated with the wealth creation that has actually happened in the world, with the kind of newer companies that have actually happened. In fact, if you really look at the history about one of the most interesting companies in the world has been one of the most innovative companies in the world. It's called General Electric. It started about 115 years back, 120 years back by Thomas Edison. But it has been innovation which has driven that organization per se. They've created amazing sets of products. They actually move from something like they make light bulbs to make the best aircraft engines in the world, to they actually have one of the most interesting non-bank financial companies, and so on and so forth. Incidentally, I must share one thing about General Electric with you, that they actually make the finest medical equipment as well. So there's been something very interesting with companies in terms of how they've sustained in the Fortune 500 list as well. It's always been driven by the innovation that they've actually had. So now the question is, what is innovation, and whether innovation is an animal which is going to happen when it's an upturn, or it's an animal which can actually be used when there is a downturn as well. From my fundamental viewpoint, innovation is something that can happen at any given point in time. It's not something which is driven in a slowdown or a downturn or whatever. But yes, innovation gives you huge sets of results, or massive results, when we are actually in the midst of uncertainty or midst of a situation where we have a slowdown and so on and so forth. In fact, one of the most interesting things, if you really look at the car industry got created somewhere in the 1930s. It was midst of the worst recession the world has ever seen. It was something like amazing in terms of the wealth destruction that was happening at that point in time. So innovation is something that can actually happen at all points in time in any kind of an economic situation. But then if you really look at the idea of innovation, we have to fundamentally understand one thing. And that fundamental understanding has to come from the idea of how change can happen, and how change can actually create various paradigms, and how change can create newer business models, and what kind of impact and effect change or technological change can actually have on businesses. See, a very simple idea or a simple question that I would like to raise here. A lot of us actually use product like, say, encyclopedias. And they've fundamentally done something phenomenal to the world in terms of providing information and so on and so forth. But then when you really talk about the 1990s, the early 90s, 1991, Encyclopedia Britannica was one of the finest encyclopedias in the world. But somewhere in the 1994-95, it was near bankruptcy. Why did that actually happen? Why does this happen? Like, in fact, this is something very important for us to understand, because this fundamentally tells me what works, what doesn't work, how the external factors could actually have an impact, or how the way the context is changing could actually unfold and have an impact on the way the company performs. So if you really look at the idea of innovation here, if I really expand the Encyclopedia Britannica example, we need to actually look at something very interesting here. It's a small 2x2 matrix that I would like to share with you. If you really look at something in the world, it's something called as products or services. And now the question is, like, all the products and services that we actually have, they have some amount of information that actually is going to be there. So if you really look at product and services, the information could either be core to the product, or information could be peripheral to the product, or information could be core to the service or peripheral to the service. But now the question is, like, what is a product where information is at the periphery, or what is a product where information is at the core? I have this question from, if any one of you could actually answer. Could you tell me something like, what is a product where information is at the periphery? Where information just enables us to actually consume the product, and it does not really necessarily mean that I'm consuming the information. So it's a question for 159 people who are logged on here. I would really like a response from you. Yes, Santosh. Okay. Okay, so let me just take...
Education is the example.
Okay, so you're saying education is... I think I have an answer from Pune. It is probably education, or how to use a microwave. Very interesting. Avinash, it's about petrol. So, like, we have some very interesting examples here. So if you really look at information where or a product where information is at the periphery, a great example could be a soap. Because soap is something which we actually use at all points in time, but information is just at the periphery. And it just enables me to consume. It could be, say, a Lee Sansi soap, or it could be a Lux soap, or whatever. And now if you really look at, say, something like a product where information is at the core, we are actually consuming information. So there was one example, it could be, say, education, or we could actually say a newspaper, or we could say it could be, say, something like a magazine, or in fact something very interesting that I was talking about, that is Encyclopedia Britannica. And now if I really see, if there are certain sets of services where information is at the periphery, we have something called as hotels or airlines. In fact, if you really look at it, hotels and airlines are something that I consume when I just need to have the information to actually go on to the airline, or go on to check in, and then I can actually fly. So the information just enables me to actually consume a particular service of traveling from one location to the other. And now, if you really look at it, this is where change can actually have an impact. What is happening to a company called Encyclopedia Britannica? Why do you think Encyclopedia Britannica, which was a great product, which was actually where information was at the core of the product, and then suddenly this company moved from being one of the finest companies in 1991 to on the verge of bankruptcy? Why do you think this actually happened? What could be the reason for it? How was the business model changing, or how do you think the whole paradigm of business actually changed in this case? Anybody who would like to answer this? Internet happened. Okay, very interesting. So one is internet. That's a very interesting point. And then if you really look at product got into a digital form, yes, you had something like CDs and everything that actually happened. But now if you really look at this, there's something very interesting, or an underlying thing that is happening to this. What is happening is that from a business model, which was typically a supply-driven model, wherein you would actually pick up a product because it's available off the shelf, or you would actually pick up a product because it's coming to your house. And if you really look at what is happening here is that suddenly the product became something called on demand. So what happened is, like, you moved from a supply-driven business to a demand-driven business. So what is happening here is, this is a clear-cut case of a context, the way the context changed, and how you had to actually look at, or how a company had to look at innovation, and how the company had to say, okay, now transformation has happened and I have to change, and I have to change my business model. So if you really look at this, so look at the idea of business. The idea of business is about transformation and understanding how this transformation can happen. I think every business that we are really talking about, whether a slowdown or the technologies or the way we look at technology, every business could actually change. Incidentally, if you really look at the idea of, say, financial services, that has fundamentally changed because of the internet. Today, I can actually bank on the internet. I have ICICI Bank or Yes Bank and so on and so forth. But now if you really look at various other things that could happen, say I would like to raise a question. How do you think travel could change because of technology? Or how do you think marriage would change because of technology? A lot of us actually would or how do you think womankind and mankind would change because of technology? In fact, if you really look at this whole idea of technological change, I think we need to understand things are going to change across the board. So what do you think? So 3 questions here. How do you think womankind and mankind would change? Or how do you think things like marriage would change? Or how do you think thing like, say, travel would change because of technology? Could we actually have some answers here? Can I have your name?
Type in your name.
Yeah, please type in your name once you're sharing the information. Yes, Shrikant. Travel is going to go virtual. Very interesting. In fact, what Shrikant says that travel is going to go virtual, that's a very important issue. In fact, if you really look at it, I think this is one of my favorite examples. Like there's a new Star Trek movie that's going to be in town in the next couple of weeks. But that's how technology could actually change the way travel happens. And suddenly there's going to be somebody who's going to say energize, and you're actually going to move from one planet to the other planet. But that's how technology changes. In fact, if you really look at it, this could be far closer than what we are really anticipating. In fact, a university in Melbourne has actually been able to move a particular product from one end of the room to the other end of the room. So that means you're able to take massive products through digitization or through whatever means of technology to the other part of the world. So travel could change suddenly. Or else you could actually talk about travel in terms of virtual travel. You have very interesting paradigm that actually got, or that we could actually see in terms of a movie called Total Recall. In fact, that's a very interesting case again, like how Arnold Schwarzenegger was moving from one part of the world to the other part of the world. And now if you really look at, say, something like, how do you think marriage could change? Okay, now we have somebody from Bangalore who's actually made a very interesting remark. Nilima, more communication. Okay, Nilima, could you just be a little more, can we have her on air? Hi Nilima, how do you think marriage would change actually? Why don't you speak out, Nilima?
Hello, this is Nilima here. Am I audible?
Oh yes, absolutely.
I'm audible. Okay, I just wanted to tell you that despite being in different vocations and having a very hectic life, having great technology like we can have video chat or we can make a video call because of having the technology available at fingertips. That's one advantage which is there in spite of being involved and being very hectic, having hectic schedules. We can still be in touch and we can communicate effectively.
Okay, so
that's all I have to say.
Okay, great. So let me just go to Shrikant here and see what Shrikant has to say from Bombay in terms of like what he feels like how marriage is going to change. He's written something very interesting here. Let's see what he has to say. Yes, Shrikant.
Am I audible enough?
Yes.
Brilliant. I think at the end of the day, we'll all end up being individuals, close networked, I think self-centered individuals. So marriage, yeah, for me is a huge question mark. I don't know how duality is going to exist with this changing time.
Okay, that's a very interesting proposition, Shrikant. But then if you really look at it, there's a very interesting movie that I saw recently, and we had a guy called Tom Cruise in that movie, and wherein what happened is like there is a machine that's lying there and a woman pops out of it. So do you think you will actually need something like womankind to actually have marriages at some point in time? So technology is going to fundamentally alter so many relationships for us. In fact, if you really look at it, from my point of view, when I said what's going to happen to mankind and womankind, from my point of view, mankind is actually just going to go bust. Because womankind, or that means women, do not actually need men for existence. In fact, like there is a recent research which has actually proven that women are hermaphrodites by nature. So if women are hermaphrodites, that would mean that men are not really going to be required. So So a lot of things could actually change in the future. So like I think it's not going to be worrying for people like say Nilima who was there. I think it's going to be worrying for people like Shrikant who might not even be required in the world in the next 50. Yes, absolutely. You and I, who might not even be required actually over some period of time. So now if you really look at it, if you really move ahead and trying to understand, remove him. If you really move ahead and see how do we understand value here? Because when I talk about innovation, I need to fundamentally understand one thing, that how can I actually create value for my customers? And what is value per se? I think we must have heard a lot of definitions per se, but now from my point of view, a very simplistic definition of value is that what kind of benefits do I actually provide? And when I talk about benefits, like it's going to be, could be monetary benefits or time benefits and so on and so forth. But now this is where I need to actually go to a very fundamental question. I think what is it that we are in the business of? Are companies in the business of selling products, or are companies in the business of selling services, or there's something else that we are trying to sell? I think this is where once we understand what we are actually in the business of, if we really understand that we are in the business of neither selling products and neither selling services, we would know that we would know businesses a little better. Because I think from fundamentally, we are all in the business of providing solutions. Providing solutions for the problems that actually exist in the world. In fact, and how these solutions could be provided in a better way is a fundamental question for businesses today. See, all of us wanted to travel at any given point in time. All of us wanted to travel faster. So suddenly from a bullock cart, we moved into, say, something like cars, then we actually moved into planes or trains, and we are looking at faster ways of travel. So technology is going to change the way we are actually going to get the solution. But the question is that we are fundamentally getting a solution here. We are neither selling a product or a service. So we are actually going to give a complete gamut of services, or you might say experiences to consumers here. I think the better word here is experiences. So if you really talk about the idea of telecom services, a lot of us would actually say that telecom services, but I would rather say that we are not in the business of selling telecom services. We are in the business of providing solutions for people to communicate and communicate with families at all given points in time. So if you really look at this whole idea of value creation here, so it's about looking at what the customer wants and how we can actually make their lives better. I think if you really look at companies across the board, they're all in the business of making lives better for their customers. If we are not making lives better for our customers, there is no reason for us to really exist. In fact, if you really look at the NIIT Imperia platform, NIIT Imperia platform is a fundamental way in which we are actually providing a solution for taking education to various sets of places across the board. So it's a solution that we are providing. It's not something, it's a beyond a classroom education, but then we have used technology for providing a great solution. So if you really look at it, we are all fundamentally in the business of providing solutions. But now, I think when we actually say we are in the business of providing solutions, technology is changing, the context is changing, then what is one single principle that is going to have a dominant effect in business? And if I feel that if you understand this one fundamental principle, you are really going to have a huge understanding, or you'll be really able to understand what business is all about. I think it is called as the God principle. What do I mean by a God principle of business? Like, now this is not something religious here, but then now the question that I'm asking is, what is the God principle of business? We need to understand this God principle of business. Can anybody answer, like, what do you think is the God principle of business? I'm looking at some answers here, like, say, if you say, like, what do we mean by the God principle? Okay, so if we really move ahead on this, the God principle would mean generate, operate, and destroy. What do we mean by this? Like, generate, operate, and destroy. You generate a product, that means you come up with a product, you operate a product in the market, and then you destroy the product in the market. That means you actually remove the product from the market. You have to continuously change the product that you're actually giving. Okay, like God provides solutions fast. We have an answer like this from Ahmedabad. No, it's not about providing solutions fast. It's about providing the appropriate solutions. It's about like generating the right set of product. It's about operating the right sets of products in the market, continuously innovating and continuously changing the way we are actually looking at things. And then of course, when the time comes, we need to actually remove these products from the market. In fact, based on this idea, I think all companies in the world should actually have something called as a CDO. But what is the CDO actually all about? The CDO is somebody who has to be called as a Chief Destruction Officer, who is actually going to fundamentally say that I'm going to redefine the way business is actually going to be done. Because if you are not going to change yourself, it's somebody else who's going to come and change the way business models are actually happening. You do not actually want to go the Yahoo way. Yahoo was fundamentally a great company till about 10 years back. But then suddenly Google happened, and look what has happened to Yahoo today. Google killed the whole paradigm of what Yahoo was all about. In fact, Google is one enterprise which is even giving a lot of problem to companies like Microsoft, because it's Google which is fundamentally altering the way business models are going to be redefined. Because Google actually says, if you really look at the computing industry per se, there is something which we can actually say is the desktop-based businesses. But now there is something which is going to be something very new, which is going to be distributed computing, or what we call as cloud computing. And then you just need to actually hire the software that you want to use, and anybody who enables that is going to be the company which is going to rule the roost here. And Google has actually gone in that direction over a period of time. So if you really look at it, it's about like fundamentally redefining businesses, fundamentally looking at newer business models and so on and so forth. But moving ahead, if you really look at the idea of innovation, a lot of us would typically talk about innovation in terms of disruptive innovation, or what do we call as incremental innovation or business model innovation. But now how do we actually differentiate it here? I think every company cannot really go for a paradigm and say that I'm going to change my business model. It has to start with something called as product innovation. It has to move to say something like business model innovations, or it has to go into say process innovations and so on and so forth. So if you really look at the whole idea, what we need to understand here is that when I actually say that it's going to be some kind of a continuous improvement that is actually going to happen. So what we are saying is that I'm going to add some features to my products, I'm going to add some newer things to the product. I could actually say my TV channel is going to move from say 60 channels to 100 channels. Now that is some kind of an improvement that happens there. Or my TV is going to have faster response times. But now the next thing is going to be, how do I actually go for a disruptive innovation? Can I actually fundamentally alter the way the product is actually going to fulfill a need? Say a washing machine. When you actually talk about the washing machines that used to be there in the past, they used to be something very interesting in terms of the washing machines which are used in Punjab to actually make lassi. So if you really look at these washing machines, then suddenly you had washing machines from companies like IFB, the top loading machines or the front loading machines, who could fundamentally wash your clothes, they could dry your clothes and everything. So that was a disruptive innovation that actually happened. Microwave is a great example of disruption. How microwave is a great example of disruption is because it fundamentally alters the way we actually cook our food. So if you really look at the whole world, it has actually been driven by these sets of ideas, or punctuated by these sets of ideas. In fact, when you talk about a technology or a solution that is happening, it's going to create newer sets of markets as well. In fact, one of the most interesting examples here is like how radio created a new paradigm of entertainment. Because radio happened in the 1960s, and it fundamentally changed the way we were really looking at entertainment. It fundamentally created a new atmosphere in the villages. People were actually thronging in the middle of the village, and they were actually trying to enjoy together. And suddenly the way we were really talking about entertainment, the village changed. Then suddenly TV happened, and then we talked about entertainment at that point in time, it changed. So if you really look at it, and now it is actually the internet. You're talking about Facebook, you're talking about Orkut, and so on and so forth. So, or you talk about Twitters. And now it's about a fundamental way, or a fundamentally different way of really entertaining ourselves and being connected. So if you really look at this whole idea, it means that there is going to be something very, very powerful that's going to happen in the world. If you really start looking at newer sets of things. And it is not always driven by technology. It is at points driven by very interesting sets of intelligent innovations from your head. They need not actually be something like computers or internet or whatever that's going to do something. It could be something very, very powerful itself. See, if I really talk about a case of a business model innovation, business model innovation as a case is something very, very powerful, wherein a lot of companies have actually used innovative ideas to really create value for its customers. One of the most fundamental examples, I think, I again would take an example of a technology company here, but I believe that it's been one of the smartest companies. In fact, if you really talk about Apple, what has Apple done to the world here? In fact, Apple has done something very, very powerful. What Apple has done is Apple created a service called iTunes. And when you talk about iTunes, what did iTunes do? iTunes actually legalized the service that we actually saw at one point in time called Napster. So what happened through iTunes is that I was able to buy music online. They were able to disaggregate music from a CD. They were able to say that I'm actually going to, you don't have to buy music together on a CD. You don't have to buy 10 songs or 20 songs on a CD. You could actually buy one song and you could pay 99 cents for it. Very, very powerful. And this fundamentally changed the way the business model actually got constructed. And if you really look at the other example of how business model got constructed is, I think one of the very powerful examples from our Indian context, and it is a company called Moser Bear. And how do you think Moser Bear redefined the way business actually happened? Moser Bear is not about technology. Moser Bear is about pricing, very smart pricing. And when you talk about Moser Bear as smart pricing, what it has actually done is that it actually looked at a new market altogether and fundamentally killed two sets of industries. And what were those two industries? Like it was the video rental business. It just messed up the video rental business altogether. And in fact, the other industry that actually really got killed was the pirated video movie industry. And Moser Bear did something wonderful, bringing down the DVD prices to, say, 49 rupees for a DVD. Very, very powerful, but not driven by technology. So if you really talk about business model innovation is something very powerful, but it does not mean that I have to be driven by technology. In fact, a very interesting example again, I think our homegrown players from South India have actually created some huge paradigms here. You talk about like what Barista or Cafe Coffee Day has done. In fact, Cafe Coffee Day was really able to move something like coffee from a 5 rupee cup to something like a 100 rupee cup of coffee. And that's a complete business model innovation that happened. What happened was that you were actually trying to create an ambience, or you were trying to create a place where people could actually sit down and enjoy, and you actually created a whole huge aura around coffee. So this was again a huge business model innovation that actually happened. So if you really talk about business model innovation here, or innovation per se here, so innovation is about looking at ideas or looking at things from a different perspective. It's about like trying to see what kind of solutions can I actually provide and how we can actually provide better value to our customers. But now the question is, if you really try to complete this argument in terms of like how do we actually provide better solutions to our customers? What do I do? And then now this is where I would actually say that we have something called a very interesting paradigm, and that is called as lips and hips. And what do you think would be lips and hips as a paradigm? Any one of you? In fact, this is a very interesting question I have. What do you think are lips and hips? If anybody could tell me what are lips and hips? Are we going to have somebody who's going to tell me what are lips and hips? And how do you think this could be a great concept in business, asking something in business or doing something in business? So lips and hips are ask and provide. Okay. Something to do with comfort and communication. So I think that's interesting, but we're still not there. Somebody else, like think a little differently. Lips and hues. Okay, so now we have somebody from Calcutta who says it's music. Okay, we still have to go dig a little deeper here. What do you think are lips and hips? Don't be perverts here. You have to think like businessmen. You don't have to think like young guys here. Think like how we could actually use this principle in business. Okay, let me make your life easier here. In fact, lips and hips would mean low involvement products and hips would mean high involvement products. And what do I mean by low involvement products? Low involvement products are products that I would actually pick up without thinking. It could be a matchstick. And then of course there is something called as a high involvement product. And high involvement product is something which I pick up after I actually think. And if you really talk about high involvement products, there are two categories here itself. There could be something which we call as utilitarian products, something like a microwave, a refrigerator, which has a long shelf life, which is going to last me for about 5 to 8 years or even 10 years. And it creates a lot of value for me over a period of time, or gives me a lot of value over a period of time. I interact with that product for a longish period. And then it's actually a utilitarian product for me. And then of course there is an ego expressive product, or what we call as a hedonistic product. And when you talk about an ego expressive product, it could be say something like a Tag Heuer watch, or probably a Mercedes car, a BMW, or a Moar blank pen, and so on and so forth. But now the challenge for business is to actually make a low involvement product into a high involvement product. Then how do I actually make a low involvement product into a high involvement product? And that's what innovation is all about, and that's execution in action, or that's innovation and action through execution. How do I do that? How do I actually make a low involvement product into a high involvement product? Anybody who could actually answer this for me? How do you make low involvement products into high involvement products? Okay, Prashant says that something forcefully by advertising and cost, change customer perception, very interesting. Okay, anybody else that, or anything else that comes to your mind? By adding more features and benefits. In fact, if you really look at it, there are three fundamental rules or three fundamental ideas that actually come up. And with some very interesting answers that I'm actually having here, I have Milind who's actually saying by making customer aware, or Pramod says that it's about internet e-business and so on and so, or adding perceived value. Yes, Dheeraj just said that. So if you really look at it, there are three basic principles that I can actually use to make low involvement products into high involvement products. And what are those three sets of principles? And those are like, one, it's going to be about adding value. The second thing is going to be about usage of emotions. And the third one is going to be about design. And if you really look at these three things, how do we actually do that? When we talk about adding value, what do we mean by adding value? Adding value would mean that I need to necessarily add value to the product, or it is going to be a perception that can actually be there. Is it realistic or unrealistic addition of value? In fact, a very interesting example here of adding value, and which is probably not really happening, and that is about something called as MMR. What is MMR? Mosquito mortality rate. And then if you really look at the mosquito mortality rate, is it real value that you're actually saying, or is it something like an unrealistic thing that is happening, but you create a perception, you actually give an idea, or you create an aura of adding value here? So that's about a great example of adding value. Then of course there is something like PSPO, peak speed performance output. Now there is a fan company which says PSPO, but at the end of the day, is it realistic value? Because all fans would actually give you air. So they all rotate and so on and so forth. But you are actually trying to give something very interesting here. In fact, I think one of the most powerful examples out of this country is something called as an example from Godrej. And what Godrej has done here is that Godrej said that in our refrigerators, isme puff hai bhara, polyurethane fiber. In fact, very interestingly, no refrigerator in the world can be made without puff. So what does it mean? So it's something like you understand how we can actually create value for customers, or how do I actually extend and benefit for him, which he does not really understand. So if you really look at it, it's about creating realistic or unrealistic value. Of course, there are great examples of adding great value also for making a low involvement to a high involvement product, and that would be, say, something like a matchstick. It's something like, say, carburized matchstick. And when you talk about carburized matchstick, something like what Ship did, or what do you call as Wimco home lights today, they actually said we are actually going to make carburized matchsticks, and they actually added value there. So if you really look at this whole huge paradigm, so one thing is adding value realistically or unrealistically, but at some points in time, what could happen is that you could actually create perceptions which are hugely biased, and or there could be something like a very interesting thing that could actually happen in terms of we actually start believing in something which is probably incorrect. In fact, a very interesting example that I would like to share with you here is something like a lot of people, or there was something in the past that happened, something like everybody started hating the cola drinks because of the pesticide issue. So it was a perception-based issue, and then suddenly it created a lot of problem for them. Was it a realistic issue that was actually happening? Incidentally, the baby milk that we actually have has probably got far more traces of pesticide residue in them. Probably the tea that we drink has far more what I call pesticide residue in it. And now this is where perceptions could actually be unrealistic. It happens across the board. Companies will have to face these challenges, but now the question is, how do they actually face it? So if you really look at this whole huge paradigm, in fact, of adding value and how realistic or unrealistic it could be, that there's something very interesting that happens, and that's about, can I actually create a generic product here? You have great companies like, what do you call it, Xerox. How many of us actually go out to the market and say, please get this paper Xeroxed? We are actually making a fundamentally wrong statement. It is supposedly, the process is supposedly photocopying. And we say, please do a Xeroxing for this. And similarly, if you really look at it, probably your parents would have actually known, or they must have actually got a cold drink or used a cold drink called Campa Cola. In fact, my dad even today says, "Mujhe Campa Cola chahiye," or "I need a Campa Cola." He does not really say that he wants a Coke or whatever. So he belongs to a generation wherein Campa Cola is a very basic generic product. In fact, that's what Coca-Cola is trying to do in India. Coca-Cola matlab thanda or thanda matlab Coca-Cola. So that's a very interesting thing that you're doing. You're trying to make your product move to something called as a generic product. And that is actually going to, so whenever you actually go to a shop and you say, I need a thanda, that would mean that you need a Coca-Cola. So that's a very, very interesting thing that you could actually do around this. So can I actually create generics? That's a big question. In fact, like surf being a generic. A lot of us, any washing powder in the world for me is a surf today. So if you just move ahead on this, so the next thing that we can actually talk about is something called as emotions. And how do I actually use emotions? Emotions is something which is very, very powerful, which could be used in very interesting sets of ways. But now the question is, how do I actually use emotions in a positive way? In fact, emotions are something which can be used very, very well. But then the question is going to be that a lot of people could actually run away from your products, or they could actually feel a little flustered. But now the question is, how do we do that? We have to use emotions very, very carefully. In fact, very interesting example here. Two sets of examples which are a little positive. If you really look at something called as, what do we call as financial products. What is the worst financial product in the world? I might actually say the worst financial product in the world could be insurance. But now the question is, why do you think, or how do you think insurance companies have actually been able to sell something which is great? Or how they have been able to create a value here? They've been able to create value by creating an emotional attachment here, by saying that we actually protect your life, we actually take care of your near and dear ones, and so on and so forth. In fact, a very interesting advertisement from LIC, which used to be Sharma ji ke baad bhi or Sharma ji ke saath bhi. But a very powerful statement on that advertisement was, okay, the house was bigger, house was swankier when Sharma ji was not there. So that's a very interesting thing, or a very interesting proposition. Or probably if you really look at the second thing, and in terms of say, how do you actually talk about helmet wearing behavior? Everybody knows that helmet is something which is going to be good for you, or you should actually wear it. But then people do not wear it. In fact, there is a very interesting advertisement which shows a watermelon, or what do you call as nariyal, which is wearing a helmet, and then there's something very interesting that happens there. You have a hammer which comes down, and the watermelon smashes and everything, and it says marzi hai aapka, sir hai aapka. But now the question is, people do not learn from it. Why? It's an advertisement which is focused on you, but you still do not actually wear helmets. So now the question is, so there are certain set of things which are going to work, and certain set of things which are not going to work. So what are the things which are actually going to work? So it's actually going to be things which are going to be working are going to be things or emotions which are actually going to be targeted towards your near and dear ones. A very interesting example on this issue of near and dear ones could be, there's a very interesting advertisement on television wherein a person is wearing he's not wearing a helmet, he's driving a motorbike, and he's actually holding a telephone in hand, and he smashes into something. And then in the background they actually show a small what do you call, girl or a young girl, and says, "Koi aapka ghar pe intezar kar raha tha." There is somebody waiting for you at home. And now that's something very, very powerful. So what we are saying is how we can actually use emotions in the right way. We have to use emotions for our near and dear ones. But now we have to use it very, very carefully. The moment we actually start using emotions for self, it actually is not really going to have any impact, or most of the time it does not really have any impact. Say something like cigarette smoking behavior. In fact, when I talk about cigarette smoking behavior, do you think advertisements on cigarette smoking, or if you can actually you're going to have your heads, or you're going to have some absolutely some hugely bad pictures on the packets or whatever, is it actually going to create a situation where people are not really going to have or people are really going to quit smoking? Probably that's not going to happen. For a simple reason, because if you want people to quit smoking, you have to actually say that it is going to have an impact on the near and dear ones. It is your near and dear ones who are actually suffering. Just showing that your lungs are going to go bad or whatever. Each one of us knows it. Anybody who's a smoker knows it. Anybody who's a smoker knows that smoking is bad. Still, he does not actually do that. So if you really look at that, emotions have to be actually used in a very, very powerful way, but they have to be used for near and dear ones. So now the next paradigm that is about design, and how can I actually use design for actually creating value? A great example is an iPod. In terms of like when you talk about an iPod is all about interface, it's all about the beauty of design, the way it is actually made. In fact, one of the most beautiful things in the world, from my point of view, is probably a computer made by Apple. There were these colored computers that actually came up. And if you really look at it, they were absolutely charming. And then people throng to it, people buy it, and there is a huge following to it. Another example that you can actually talk about design is in terms of what we could actually say is a car, something like a Beetle. In fact, when you talk about the Beetle as a car, one of the largest or highest selling cars in the world, and when you talk about this car, like, what's great about it? In fact, the Nissan's chief at one point in time had actually said, everything is wrong with this car except it is drop dead gorgeous. So it's absolutely a beautiful thing, in terms of the car. So it's about the design factor. In fact, when you talk about design, design can actually be used in a very, very powerful way, and it's being used by companies across the world. In fact, one of the simplistic examples is like how Colgate actually makes people consume more toothpaste by increasing the size of the nozzle, or by how do they actually make you use more toothpaste by actually giving your toothbrush which is a little longer than what is required. So if you really look at it, so design can fundamentally create a lot of impact on consumption behavior. So when we talk about design, design could actually be used or combined in very naughty ways as well. In fact, one of the most interesting or naughty examples that I feel is like what companies have actually used here is something from the recent example is from Malika Sherawat. When Malika Sherawat was actually being shown on TV for an advertisement for a cola drink, or it was actually for the Fido drink, that is 7-Up, and suddenly she says, Fido mujhe thoda curvaceous bana de, and please make me a little more curvaceous, and so on and so forth, and suddenly she turns into a bottle of a cold drink. And so that's something very, very powerful again. So that's an aspect of design. In fact, the most beautiful design in the world could actually be seen as a bottle of Coke, because it's supposed to be the most perfectly carved out woman. So that's a perfect 36, 24, 36 figure that we are really talking about. So if you really look at it, design has a huge impact on the consumption behavior of people. In fact, one more example that I would like to share is something like, say, Lee Sansi, or Lee Sansi as a soap. In fact, when you talk about Lee Sansi as a soap, it was a product at one point in time, but then it was something like a bean-shaped soap, and people used to believe that it's a very big soap, even though it was actually small, because the packaging used to have or give you a feeling that it's a big soap. So if you really look at it, design actually creates a lot of interesting situations. So now if you really look at this whole huge idea of innovation, and when we say innovation is something which creates wealth, innovation is something which is happening across the board or whatever. It could be, say, something like continuous improvement, or it could be something like, say, radical innovation or disruptive innovation, or it could be, say, business model innovation, and how we could actually execute it by providing additional value to the customer, by, say, moving from low involvement products to high involvement products, and so on and so forth. But now the question is, how do you think innovation can actually help a country like India? Can innovation help a country like India? Of course. But now the question is, all of us are actually looking at India from a wrong aspect today. If everybody is saying that India is slowing down, or there has actually been a huge or a major issue in terms of the way the whole slowdown has actually impacted, I think we are not really looking at businesses in the right sense of the word. In fact, if you really talk about India, what is the total percentage of India that lives in the urban markets? 29%. So that means 70% or more than 70% of the Indian market actually resides in the rural areas. And if you really look at companies which are focused in the rural areas, they've actually been able to grow during this downturn itself. And one of the finest examples is Maruti. The other example that you could actually look at is something like the telecom companies. Primarily, say, when you talk about Airtel, Reliance, they focused on the rural segment and they've really grown. So if you really look at India, India is about something very interesting here. So you could actually look at innovation, but then innovation does not mean technology. Innovation would actually mean that going to the right set of market segments, looking at the right pricing. And the most interesting example is, from my point of view, is like what Dharampal Satyapal Group does. They actually bring out something like the kind of things that you choose, something like a Pan Parag or Rajnigandha or whatever. And these companies are actually taking it to the rural market, and look at the complete aggregation that actually happens here. And this aggregation is actually going to have an impact in terms of the sales and in terms of profitability. And another thing that we really need to look at is, in this downturn, who are the people who are actually going to buy? A very simple example, what is the biggest market in this country? One way could be, okay, women is the biggest market in this country. 50% of this country is women. So if you talk about 50% of this market, why don't we actually focus our products on women maybe? And now, if you really look at it, women are compulsive buyers. There is no doubt about it. And when you must have actually seen a lot of cartoons wherein women would actually go into a store and whatever, and they'll actually take a longish route. And if there is somebody who wants to, there's a very interesting piece that I read wherein it says, that if a woman wants to buy a pair of jeans, or if a man wants to buy a pair of jeans, a man would go to a jeans store and actually do shopping worth about $35. And if a woman actually wants to buy a pair of jeans, she'll actually go to a store and spend greater than $800. Now that's something very interesting. So that means we need to focus on women. There is no doubt about it. And similarly, if you really look at another thing, in fact, a lot of us tend to say that the younger generation is actually going to spend money. But I have a different way of looking at it. It's probably people who are going to turn 50 today. They are going to be the biggest market for you in the next 5 years. How? And for a simple reason, people who are going to turn 50 today, they're going to be left with about half of their adult working life still to go. So that means they are actually going to be people who would actually buy so many things. In fact, something very interesting here again, on an average, if a person buys something like 15 cars in his lifetime, and if he buys 15 cars, then the behavior shows that about 70% of your car consumption is going to happen after the age of 50. It's not going to happen before the age of 50. And that's going to be true for most of the high-end products. So we need to focus on people who are beyond the age of 50 because that's where the market is. If you really look at the younger population, yes, that's growing, but there is a market. I'm not negating that fact. But the question is, we are fundamentally missing a few points here. And those points are that the market of women, the market of, say, adults, and so on and so forth. So if you really look at this whole idea of downturn or uncertainty or whatever, I think we have to look at things in a fundamentally new light. We have to build newer perspectives to how we really look at things. And perspectives is what is really going to redefine businesses for me. And so if you really try to sum this up, now we are actually moving towards the closure. If you really look at trying to sum this whole thing up, it is about looking at things in a fundamentally different way, looking at how innovation can actually create wealth. And when you talk about wealth creation, it does not necessarily mean that I have to actually talk about technology. In fact, one last point that I must actually share with you. In fact, like a lot of us tend to believe that when you talk about whether it is industries which are innovative or whether it is firms which are innovative. In fact, a lot of people tend to believe that either you're in an innovative industry or you're dead. No, it's not that way. It's about what kind of innovation can I actually do in any industry in the world. In fact, one of the most interesting examples is if you talk about agriculture. Agriculture could be so innovative. You could have so many innovations. You have a country like, say, Israel, which has done fundamentally huge things in agriculture. So that means it's not about what do you call technology. Any industry could be innovative. Any industry could actually use technology. It could actually be, it could be high tech and so on and so forth. So what happens is it's not industries which are high tech or low tech. It is firms which are high tech or low tech. And firms which are going to be low tech, who do not actually look at innovations, they are the firms who are actually going to die down over a period of time. They are actually going to be the firms which are not going to be staying in the Fortune 500 list in the future. And if you really look at this whole huge thing that we have done here, this is something which we are going to do in the course also. So in fact, this is where we are really going to do something on the strategy course. And these are a few principles which we are really going to expand over a period of time in the next 3 months. And we are actually going to use a lot of cases, a lot of insights, and a lot of discussions to really build ideas for ourselves and build frameworks for ourselves to really do business better. Thank you.
Well. For some of us who tuned into only parts of the lecture, from areas like Malika Sherawat and lips and hips, we almost thought that, well, this is going to be a very entertaining evening indeed. But from there to the world of LIC, from that world when we are talking of young and future and the yuppies who's being told, no, it's actually, there's a lot of juice with the 50 pluses because they are the ones who have the money and they are the ones who are going to spend. I think we've heard a lot of thoughts, a lot of views, and a very, very wide range of examples. From Nissan to Colgate to LIC, we talked about Malika Sherawat, of course, and so many others. I think it's as much of an eye-opening experience as we would have had. This, of course, is only the tip of the iceberg. As many of you will know that Dr. Amit Kapoor is offering a full 3-month program on competitive strategy, which is an advanced program on competitive strategy, which will delve in a great deal of depth into many of the issues that he has just touched upon today, and with his huge wealth of insights, I think we'll be able to understand a lot of that very well indeed, both from a global perspective as well as from an Indian perspective. But that is only for the for those who will decide to take on and join the three-month advanced program on competitive strategy. In the meantime, there have been a number of questions and comments which have been coming up, not all of which Professor Kapoor has been able to address so far, and this part of the session completely belongs to you. And you could continue to type in, and I will read through and aggregate them for the professor to address, and some of you will be putting them online. So whatever are your queries, comments, please feel free to shoot. And may I invite Murugan from Chennai. He's been popping up a number of queries. Murugan from Chennai, would you raise your hand so that we can put you on air? There have been a number of comments that you have made. Yeah, Murugan.
Hello.
Yeah, yes, you are on air.
Could you able to hear me?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear. All of you will, your mics are pre-tuned, so if you have not moved your headset, we'll hear you loud and clear. Shoot, Murugan. The professor's waiting.
Amit, thanks for the innovative. Thanks for your lecture. Is it today possible to have innovation more towards perception and the concept than the product? Because that's what Dr. Edward de Bono also was insisting. Innovation need not be always towards product and process. Okay, and I feel that for a country like India in this uncertainty, innovation to bottom of pyramid.
Absolutely.
Whereas in all the Western and everything.
I absolutely agree with you. In fact, if you really talk about India, India is a great opportunity on the bottom of the pyramid, and you have to create huge sets of ideas around this. In fact, two examples. In fact, one of them I actually shared before, and that was about something like what Moser Bear has actually done. The second great example here is a company like Air Deccan, or what has actually become Kingfisher Red now. It was about bottom of the pyramid, or it was about the common man. Another example that we can actually talk about is something like Dharampal Satyapal Group or Nirma or whatever, who have actually looked at the lower end of the market and they really aggregated into huge sets of profits. So India is about the bottom of the pyramid. It's not about like you have to do some products or whatever. India needs pricing innovations. India does not need product innovations right now. You could actually have products which need to be there. You need to bring technologically superior products, but then it is pricing. Talk about telecom here today. How did the telecom sector actually come up? It was about the pricing innovation. Till the time the telecom services were being sold at 16 rupees 80 paisa per minute, nothing happened. It actually started really growing like crazy after the prices dropped down to say about 1 rupee a minute. And look at the kind of market that we are really talking about today. We are already talking about close to about 400 million customers in this country. So it is about the pricing innovation that actually happened. So India fundamentally needs pricing innovation, and that pricing innovation needs to look at the bottom of the pyramid market per se.
Yeah, I have one more last question. Okay, we have curriculum for, as Peter Drucker said, marketing and innovation are the two for the business. Rest are all cost. We don't have any curriculum seen on creative and innovation exclusively. We have seen in marketing and other things. There is no curriculum for management professionals on innovation and creativity. It always mixed with something else.
Okay, then I must share something very interesting with you here. When you talk about innovation and creativity, in fact, there's a very interesting innovation and creativity institute that's actually coming up in India. In fact, I'm going to be sitting on the board of that institute, but then that's going to be called the Medici Institute. But then the question is, like, I think the curriculum needs to, far bigger idea, the curriculum needs to actually go into the business schools, and they need to actually look at how we could look at innovation at the grassroots level, how we could actually look at creativity, because creativity is something that we are all lacking. We need to actually go towards that direction. But I think
I think we have to bring the Dr. Edward de Bono concept, everything fully into the, even understanding the value actually. How he gave the framework for 6 value medals. Okay, creativity, how the today Olympic successful is the man behind him. Even Australian cricket winning is the man behind him. But I don't think that much creativity and innovative curriculums is made available.
It is not, but then I must actually share one thing with you. We are going to use a lot of those principles in the course that we are going to conduct here. In fact, we are going to really use Edward D. Bono's work. We are going to use Gary Hamel's work. We are actually going to use Clayton Christian's work on creativity and innovation. So you might see some very interesting sets of things coming up. We are going to see something like the Franz Johansson's work on creativity and seeing how we could actually create something unique for businesses worldwide.
Well, I guess that will be a program.
Thank you, Amit.
Welcome.
That will be a program that will take us into a lot of depth into that. Let me read through a number of comments and remarks which have been there. Once again, I'll request everyone to type in the names at the beginning of the message so we can read out your particular comment by mail. Let's go to, or just read out Ashutosh from Mumbai. Ashutosh from Mumbai has had a comment that FMCG companies have made inroads in rural markets by selling small sachets, which is really the point that Dr. Amit Kapoor was making about pricing innovation, that pricing itself can make a huge difference. There's a comment from Hyderabad that innovation works depending on the purchasing power of the people. Yes, indeed. So if the vast masses of India, if 70% of India is in the villages, then we have to make sure it fits into the kind of pockets, and that's the point that has been made very persuasively there. Dr. Dipali Roy from Pune has a very precise question to ask. Can the GOD principle, I don't know whether I should call it the God principle or I'll read it out as the GOD principle, can the GOD principle be applied to the service industry like healthcare industry?
Dr. Roy, absolutely. The generate, operate, destroy principle can actually be used in any industry per se. If you really look at it, when you talk about healthcare industry in this country, today the healthcare industry is actually coming out with newer solutions in this country. If you really look at the state of healthcare in India, it used to be absolutely abysmal about 10 years back, but now there has been huge innovations in terms of companies like Max New York Life coming in, or companies like Fortis coming in, so on and so forth. And they're really changing the way the paradigm of healthcare. But now the question is, that paradigm is too much focused towards the higher strata of the society. We need to actually find solutions which are going to be for the lower strata of the society as well, for people who are not very savvy or people who cannot really spend a lot of money. So we need to actually create principles, the pricing principles or innovations wherein we can actually take, say, good healthcare practices or great care to people who are not very rich or who cannot actually spend a lot of money.
Rashmi from Ahmedabad, she's been a very active participant today, and she has a comment that the huge market for quality primary education, is there a possibility of extrapolating NIT Imperial to this cause? Well,
okay, now that's a very interesting question. I certainly feel that this is a very interesting platform which could actually take quality education to the masses. And if you really talk about primary education, why not? You could actually take it there. In fact, I think a great example that comes to my mind is the advertisement from Idea Cellular, wherein you have Abhishek Bachchan's advertisement wherein kids are actually learning in school through cellular telephone. Great idea, and it's probably workable. And this technology is far more robust, and you can actually take it for primary education, and it works. I think it's going to be a business idea that NIIT would actually have to really explore and see.
That again is all about innovation, I guess, in these
Absolutely.
uncertain times. So, Avinash from Hyderabad has asked of you that many of the examples you have taken were in the Indian context. Will the course you will be talking about global business and economy as well?
Oh yes, absolutely. The whole course is going to be structured around a lot of innovative Harvard Business School case studies that we're going to use. If you really look at the curriculum, you would see that we are going to discuss tons and tons of beautifully written HBS, Harvard Business School case studies, which would actually range from companies from Microsoft to Yahoo to Merck Medco to say De Beers and so on and so forth. So the course is actually going to have something, a global flavor to it. It's going to be India focused, it's going to be global focused. So anybody who actually comes to the program would actually enjoy learning from this. And of course, the basic idea is to actually give principles, and basic idea is to actually create a framework for you in terms of how do we actually strategize and how we can actually use these principles in our businesses. So that's how it is going to be.
So would it be fair to say that most of the cases and examples that you'll be taking up during the course would the same cases which would have been taught at many of the best B schools that we know about across the world?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I guess that leaves a lot of exposure coming in our way for those of us who are joining in for that particular program. But in the meantime, we have a comment from Bombay that the GOD plus lips and hips, that's a nice equation, is put God plus lips and hips is equal to continual improvement towards the heart with the head of the consumer. how do we innovate for the heart? You can innovate for the head. How do you innovate for the heart? Now that's a tricky one for you.
Okay, now I'll actually invite you to actually come for the session on innovation, blue ocean strategy, and the Medici effect that we're going to do during the course. But I think we have some very interesting answers for this. But I'll reserve it for the course that the session we're going to have.
So if we say a yes or a no, so is there innovation for the heart? Is that answer a resounding yes?
When you actually say, I think when you are actually talking about the heart, it's more about like how we can actually use emotions. So that's the right way of really putting that question rather than saying the heart. Yes, we can actually use emotions in a very strong way.
A topic that's very contemporary and very important to people in India. Amit Kumar from Delhi asks, how exactly is innovation going to help out the outsourcing industry in the midst of this time when companies are closing operations, are involved in downsizing?
Okay, now, Amit, this is a very interesting question which typically is focusing on the global, how the global turmoil is panning out to be. But then if you really look at it, this is where I think fundamentally some Indian companies made a mistake, that they did not actually hedge. They were just too focused on the United States. And they were not really hedging their businesses to, say, regions like Europe or regions like Australia or whatever. So I think this is where they fundamentally got their business models wrong. They should have actually looked at hedging things across the board. But now, when you are saying that these companies are closing down or whatever, I think there is still a chance for them. They could actually look at how they could use or bring these services to a country like India. You could actually, you need so much of what you call customer interaction within this country as well, which has not really happened. In fact, if you really have to see the companies like say Videocon or whatever, or say ICICI, in fact typically ICICI, you have to actually wait for your turn to come for about say 30 minutes for a telephone call. So if you really look at this kind of a situation, I think there is huge opportunity for companies who could focus on India, who could actually give their services to India. And we have not really looked at this opportunity. And in fact, I would rather say like this is a great consulting question. In fact, anybody needs or wants an answer for this, it's going to be a pleasure to work with that company.
So would it be fair just to pick up one strand of your session today that possibly price innovation could also be an answer, one of the many answers to the outsourcing conundrum that has been asked right ahead. All right, we move on from Delhi. There was a question on could we talk about some service innovations. I guess some of that has been talked about already. Swati from Chandigarh, is innovation involving just the perception of the product sustainable?
I'm a little unclear with this question, Swati. Could you just elaborate this a little bit?
Swati, we are putting you on air. Yes, Swati, on air. Would you like to put?
Yes. Yeah, good evening, sir.
Hi, Swati.
First of all, thank you so much for the seminar. Hey. So I just wanted to know, like we have the advertisements where, the concept of the product is very much hyped up. So I just wanted to know, is the change involving just the perception of the product in the mind of the consumer sustainable?
Okay, now what you're saying is like if you just change the perception, is that sustainable? No, it has to actually go along with how we could actually give value in the product itself. You have to do something with the product. You cannot actually give, just create perceptions. You have to have real worth in the product as well. So when I say the Godrej Puff example, it was an example where that puff was there, but nobody actually used that positioning, and this company actually used it. So the question is like if there is a good positioning of paradigm available, so we could actually go towards that extent. But you cannot actually make a false promise somewhere. So it always has to be supported with a great product and a great service.
So if I may add, if you're changing the perception, then there's a new perception which gets created. The product has to deliver to that perception thereafter, and only then will it be a sustainable part. There are a few questions from Calcutta, and could we just minimize the window, please? Swati, thank you so much. Now, from Calcutta, there's a question, but there's an unnamed person. For pharma products, would you call process re-engineering, especially for complicated protein therapeutics, innovation? Is that innovation or is that not innovation?
Again, like it's a question which you're talking about, like how the whole thing is probably manufactured. So if you really talk about the manufacturing processes, yes, it has to be categorized as process innovation. Because you're really finding a new way of really manufacturing, and if you're really reducing your cost through innovation, then it has to be put in another category there. So it's a question which has to be a far more elaborate question in terms of saying, is it costs have got reduced, or it's a new way of really producing and you've been able to go to a scale which is tremendous. And if that has happened, then it has to be taken as process innovation.
There's a gentleman from Nasik who has a question, but he hasn't typed it out for us. May I request you to type out your name and then your question or your comment so we can take it up. In the meantime, we have Dr. Navtej Singh from Chandigarh. His question is, all management education focuses on products, FMCG, etc. Sunshine sectors like healthcare in recession. Are there any dedicated health management knowledge available on this?
Navtej, absolutely. In fact, I actually do a course on healthcare management actually with the Public Health Foundation of India. And that's a very interesting course on healthcare. So there is a lot of knowledge available. And if somebody wants to do a course like this, we could still offer it through the NIT platform.
Certainly that there is a lot of interest in the broader health sector, and you are right, whether the times are good or the times are bad, health is a very important facet for society and as a whole. And if there is interest in it, there is a lot of body of knowledge which is available, which resides in professors like Dr. Kapoor, and those are things which can be worked on, and that knowledge is available to have a short answer to your question. Mr. M.S. Bhargav from Hyderabad. Sir, is this innovation principle works in all situations like recession, rising inflation, etc.? Is it immune to every other force working in the market, including demand and supply?
Okay, now the question is, like, when you talk about this, I'll take this. This is a very longish question, but I'll just try to answer in a very short way. Does this principle? Can I have a look at the question? Yeah. Okay, so if you really say that, does it work in situations like recession, rising inflation, and so on and so forth? Yes, it does. If you talk about recession, I think recession needs pricing strategies. Inflation means that, okay, you need to actually have products and services which are really going to counter the inflation thing. So that means competition or your company needs to focus on costs at that point in time. So that needs to happen. And then, is it immune to every other force working in the market, including demand and supply? How do we say that? In fact, if you really look at other forces like, say, demand and supply, that they have to pan out. And demand and supply equations are dependent on so many factors. It's not a ceteris paribus principle. And demand and supply principles are really going to work across the board with how pricing could change, how product characteristics could change, and so on and so forth. So it's not going to be that it's going to be immune. It's really going to be, how do you play with these situations? How do you really go to newer markets, or how do you go to newer market segments, and how do you actually provide unique solutions?
Prashant Zambat from Nagpur. Can pricing innovation and the GOD principle be applied to jewelry manufacturing industry? Let me attempt to answer that on behalf of the professor, that clearly what he's talked about, that these principles get applied to every industry possible. How to apply it is really the magic question. That is what has to be thought through. But the principles that he has laid out are absolutely explicit. These have universal application, and it will have a full-fledged application in any, including the jewelry industry, because the principles of innovation, newness, thinking, radical thinking all remain. Okay. There's Rashmi has something on implementation, which the gentleman from Nasik hasn't asked this question as yet. From Gurgaon, Rajiv Bajaj. What type of pre-reading will be given for the course on advanced program on competitive strategy? So that is on the course that you are going to be offering very shortly. So that's a question that Rajiv Bajaj has to ask of you.
Rajiv, loads of it actually. I think your pre-reads are actually going to be something like at least 70 to 100 pages for every session on Sunday that we are actually going to have. So pre-reads are going to be exceptionally intensive. And of course, I've just authored a book on strategy, so probably that would also be published by that time, and you'll probably get it as a pre-read if NIT agrees for that.
So therefore there is going to be a lot of heavy reading. So it's not just going to be a classroom session where you come in, listen to the professor and go away. I think there's a lot of hard work that will need to be put in terms of the reading that you will need to do. And I guess that is the only way that a complex and a challenging area like strategy, and that too competitive strategy, can be understood and mastered. So it will require a fair degree of reading, and there's a lot of plans that the professor has shared with us. There's a lot of things that we'll have to go through. So certainly there are a lot of case studies to be read. There's a lot of areas on strategy. You mentioned a whole set of no, I wouldn't say authors. I would say people who have really set out various kind of paradigms. And we talked about De Bono at that time, and there were at least 3 other names that Dr. Kapoor mentioned. So these have all been path-breaking people who've set out various forms of innovation, certain processes for innovation and strategy, and those are all that will be gone through with.
In fact, just to add to this point, if you really look at the success of the program, it's going to be hugely dependent on how much you actually read for the session. Because this is a session wherein we learn together. We'll actually build the whole context together. So pre-reads are going to be very important for the success of the program. And once you actually have done the pre-reads, at least for the cases, and then we can actually come back and then we discuss and we build principles and use those principles on real life situations.
So it's an input-output.
Exactly.
It's an input-output. So you have to contribute, you have to participate, you have to do your reading, and that's when you progress. Okay, from Pune, Sachin, Dr. Kapoor, can you please add some more ideas about pricing innovation? Allow me to hold that question. I'll read through about 5 or 6 questions, and we can pick up some of them. From Anirban from Delhi, how can we create an environment of innovation where generally people are resistant to change and innovation is all about change? So do you want to and Ashish from Bombay says, innovation costs money for a product, and at the same time you spoke about right pricing. So I think three questions that you might want to reflect on.
If you really look at innovation, like innovation does not necessarily cost money. In fact, I think it's about, if you really look at the pricing window, it's about aggregation of the kind of things that I'm really trying to do. If I want to sell a product, and if I'm able to aggregate it to larger numbers, my margins are going to be huge. I'm going to have experience curve effects coming in on manufacturing. It's actually going to be something in terms of like huge aggregation on, say, smaller numbers. So that's really going to be something very powerful. And when you really talk about something like can we create the right environment? I think companies which are not really going to create the right environment, they are going to be companies who are going to die down over a period of time. But then there is something fundamentally wrong with this question, I think. I think this question would actually tell you that all of us, or we would actually say that it's the company which needs to provide the right environment for working and whatever. But I think it's actually our responsibility as well to actually create and innovate and really take it to our companies. It's not just about companies providing the right environment. Everybody cannot be Google, but then I think all of us have the potential of creating products which are very unique for our companies, and that's what we should do. And we need to actually create wealth for our companies at the end of the day.
So is it a state of the mind along with a very structured and disciplined process which sets the ground for innovation?
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right. PB Guradi from Nasik, you put your name there, but and your question is, what are the main reasons for the present uncertainty and how long is it going to last? Well, I wish...
okay, a very simple thing on this. If you really want to listen to this, come to the World Economic Forum in Seoul, where I'm actually speaking on this. So you're most welcome to actually come there and listen to this.
So, well, an air ticket to Korea is all that you need to find the answer to this million dollar question. But in the meantime, Medha from Nagpur has a question that is going to stump you, Dr. Kapoor. She says that GM has been, as a company, GM has been a master of innovation and innovative practices. In fact, many books have been written now about GM. So, her question is, why is GM going through such a tough phase, despite being a company which has had such a strong practice of innovation?
When you actually say that GM has been a great company, and there is no doubt about it. They've actually done something in terms of, like, say, newer cars, newer models, and so on and so forth. But I think there's a larger idea to this whole failure of GM. I think it's about the recession or the kind of problems that the U.S. economy is facing today. If you really talk about the United States, it's not only about GM, it's about banks, it's about Lehman Brothers, which actually went, just closed down and so on and so forth. So it's about a lot of things that are happening in the U.S. economy. It's a fundamental flaw, systemic shock that the U.S. economy has actually got into. So it's beyond GM now.
There were a couple of other questions. We've just lost a few questions on the screen while it comes back to us. But one question was, in which industry is innovation a must? I think the answer you've gone through is that innovation is an omnipresent, omni-required part across different industries. It has to be there everywhere, and that is the only way that it will sustain. I'm sorry, we've lost about the last 5 or 6 questions. The last 5 or 6 people who've typed in questions. I mean, we just request you to re-key in. There seems to have been a technical hitch. The 5 or 6 questions seem to have got lost. So we just have to request you to type that in again. But clearly, Dr. Kapoor, some of the themes that have been coming across is that it doesn't matter where you are and in what field you are, there is room and space for innovation everywhere. It's about finding it there and forcing yourself to think about it. I think innovation is also the pathway out of despair, because if doing the classic traditional things no longer work, then it's time to change the rules of the game and think different, and all major successes are built out of that. And that is something what Rajiv Bajaj's question from Gurgaon is also leading up to. What are some of, thank you so much for typing in again. Rajiv, what are some of the disruptive innovations that are happening across business models and industries these days? What are the things that are
in fact, I shared some of them with you. I think Kingfisher is a great example. Moser Bear is a great example, wherein disruptive innovations have actually happened, or iTunes, Napster, and so on and so forth. So there's some great examples of how innovation has actually happened across the board.
So there's lots of it. I think it's in processes, it's in industries, across companies. Innovation is where you look for it. You have to perhaps look at it with the right lens. Okay, Milind from Pune has a question, perhaps picked up from Dr. Kapoor's forthcoming seminar at Seoul in Korea, and the question is, kindly comment on Daewoo, please, Doctor.
No comments on this actually right now, please. I'll really try to refrain from this one.
All right, so we shall refrain. Mehta, you had a question, so while I read it out, we may not be able to address it. There's a lot of others who are asking a first question. That her question is, don't external factors figure in innovation?
How do we define external factors? I think we need to really understand. What you're saying is internal factors would be culture, or how the education setup has actually been created. Of course, those have huge sets of impacts on innovation per se. But I think when you actually talk about external factors, it has to be really looked at from a huge perspective. External is not just about a simple word. It's about huge many things that could actually have an impact.
Ashish from Bombay has a comment that all products are extremely price sensitive, wherein even a few cents can make a huge difference. Margins are paper thin. Innovation and rural markets cost money.
Absolutely, innovation and rural markets cost money, but they also give you profitability. I think we have to look at the idea that it's about aggregation. It's not about just having a model wherein we are actually going to have price skimming all the way. It could actually be penetrative pricing as well.
And it's not just about profitability, it's also about absolute profit, which means if rural markets are where the volumes are, that is where the huge size of your market gets in. So there are products which are not so price sensitive, but there are also products which are very, very price sensitive, and how you play your pricing innovation game depends on how you assess these particular factors. PB from Nasik again, PB Kakre. In this area of uncertainty, slowdown, pink slip, and low employee morale, how does one keep motivated to stick on the path of innovation? That's it. Again,
I think the way I've defined innovation, I think innovation is just not about technology or really making a lot of investments in R&D. Innovation is about so many things. It could actually be trying to create a unique culture. It could be about going to doing a lot of training as well, trying to learn and so on and so forth. So innovation is a very huge concept. It's not just about a small thing about R&D and so on and so forth.
Priya from Calcutta has a very precise question, and she says, innovation versus competitiveness is the major pharmaceutical debate today. What do you see in the future?
I think I would really say that if you really talk about innovation versus competitiveness, I do not think there is something like innovation versus competitiveness. Competitiveness encompasses innovation. So it's about innovation and competitiveness. It's not about just innovation versus competitiveness. Any industry because I think if you really talk about competitiveness as cost, then that's a wrong way of really looking at competitiveness. Because competitiveness is not about costs. Competitiveness is about giving better value. And that is what it is. So it's not just about innovation versus competitiveness. It's innovation and competitiveness. And in fact, if you really talk about competitiveness, I think we need to fundamentally understand that competitiveness is about productivity. How do I actually get the best possible output out of the rupee that I invest in my business? In fact, so competitiveness is not about cost. That's a wrong definition of competitiveness.
Sumit from Delhi, I have a question which is not really on the seminar, it's something else. He asked, so does your course fulfill the WIIFM theory? I have no clue what that is. What is in it for me, and does it give a job guarantee? Well,
not at all.
I don't think anything in life gives you a job guarantee. But if the areas which are covered in the program and you want to cover it in serious depth, if that is of interest to you, then it's of interest to you. If it's not of interest to you, stay away from it. All right. Dr. Singh from Chandigarh. While we wait for a healthcare management program, how well will the strategic management program address my quest for some new revelations to apply in hospital successes?
Huge, actually. If you really look at this whole idea of the course, it starts from the idea of, say, who are my customers, trying to understand the right positioning and so on and so forth, and of course trying to look at what I need to do, what I don't need to do, how do I actually create the right sets of processes. So these are the fundamentals that we are actually going to use, and we are going to have some cases on pharmaceutical industry at least, which are going to be applicable across businesses. Because if you really look at some principles, they are tested principles which can actually be made applicable to various sets of businesses. The question is, how do we actually tinker them for, say, something like the healthcare sector? And of course, you could actually do a project during this course, wherein we could actually look at a situation where it becomes applicable to the hospital success as well.
So does that mean that the project that a person will take up can be in his specific area of interest?
Absolutely.
Okay. So that could take care of a specific area of interest that you have in healthcare, Dr. Singh. But clearly the principles and the examples that will come across, not only from healthcare but across industries, all of them have applicability, because that's the world. We are in a world where strategy and strategic choice and competitiveness exists in whichever industry we are in. And some of these principles have universal application. Meena Shivram from Delhi, Meena Shivram from Delhi has a question. How does India compare with China on providing innovative products and services? In India versus China question.
And now if you really look at it, I think it's a very big question in terms of innovative products and services. But then if you really look at one of the best indexes or indices to really see is something called as patenting. And if you really look at the patenting figures of India versus China, then India is abysmally low, and there are some shocking figures in store for you. In fact, if you really look at some kind of things like patenting out of India, it's probably, I think, if I'm not wrong, in fact, I think I'll give you the right figure. In fact, patenting in India is lower than one single university in the United States. So that could be a way of really looking at it. And China is way ahead of us in terms of innovations and patenting and so on and so forth.
We are running out of time. We have just about 15 minutes more, so we'll quickly go through the questions. There's one specific question which is coming up for you, Dr. Kapoor. There seems to be a lot of interest in your program that you are going to offer. Is that to simulate the real market situation and the competition? Is there any element of simulation that you've built into your program?
Oh yes, there is an element of simulation in this, but then that's actually going to be something which is going to happen as a classroom interaction, because for the simulation we need actually people to come together and work together, and it's going to be a 2-day interaction that we will.
So, which means in the simulation they'll actually be constructing and seeing the results of strategic choices that people are taking in the.
Oh yes, in fact, we are going to use the Markstrat simulation that has been created by INSEAD, and I believe all of us really know what INSEAD is all about. And this whole simulation is really going to make you work and run companies for yourself. So you'll actually be a CEO or whatever, you'll work in groups, you run a company, and you'll actually be competing with other sets of companies in the industry that we create during the innovation process. And there are going to be parameters like stock price indexes and everything that are going to really reflect your performance. So it's a very, very powerful tool which would actually help you in assimilating whatever you've learned, and it'll actually help you in using whatever you've actually learned in this course.
So would it almost give a CEO level kind of perspective of a business and enterprise?
Absolutely.
Okay, so that simulation coming up as well in some form, and from what I hear, it's an INSEAD simulation, the Markstrat, it's developed at INSEAD, renowned place of education again, and Markstrat simulation. So some of you had a query on how the applicability to the real world. This is where whatever has been taught to you or whatever you've gone through the program, you'll actually get a chance to test it on a simulation before going back to your respective businesses and areas and running it on your own businesses. Okay, Pramod from Bangalore. 3M being an innovation company, they are in the downtrend in the US. Is it due to irregularity of product innovation, or is it because of pricing innovation? 3M, why is it in a loop?
I think, Pramod, as of now, I might not be in a position to answer this question, because I think we need to look at 3M more deeply. I need to look at 3M more deeply and seeing what they're actually going through. So this is a very company-specific question, but if you email it across to me, I'll actually send you an answer for sure in the next 24 hours.
Prashant, you've asked a question earlier. Your question is financial accounting background a must for the course? The answer is no. A financial accounting background is not a must for the course. Your ability to appreciate and understand business and apply yourself to the inputs that are given to you will be the important part for the course. From Pune, Sachin, what is the difference between radical innovation and disruptive innovation?
Prashant, Sachin, I do not really differentiate between radical and disruptive innovation. I think they are the same thing. They're typically about trying to find fundamentally newer capability and trying to create newer markets. So I would rather take them together.
Okay. Sudhir from Chandigarh so the innovation has always been rewarded, but why is innovation not integral to business? Well,
I do not think that innovation is not integral to business. I think a lot of companies might not spend on R&Ds. So R&D might not be integral to business, but innovation is always integral to business. And if you really look at the entrepreneurial streak that we have in this country, it's always been driven by innovation, newer ways of really looking at providing solutions to people's problems.
So it may or may not be called innovation in a sense of the big classical multinational company, but I think even if you are traveling on a train and you have a salesman who walks up and down, he does use a fair amount of innovation in how he pitches across his wares to you. I think that is perhaps inbuilt into the Indian psyche, and perhaps we are far better placed on innovation than we think we are. I'm afraid we'll take another 3 or 4 questions. We may not be able to run through the rest of the questions, so we might have to be a little selective. We are running out of time. Dr. Kapoor has another engagement beyond 8:30, so he's spared his time with us. From Amit Sotanke from Pune, how can innovation, can I go up that? Amit Sotanke. How can innovation be applied to Indian garments and food industries with respect to selling products as experiences? I think we'll skip this because the principles of innovation are always about delighting the consumer through all the examples that we've talked about, finding the hidden consumer needs or things which are latent and not so much on the surface, and those can be applied as much to Indian garments and food industries. It's a specific question that might take time that we do not have to address at this particular moment. Avinash from Hyderabad, what's the innovation spent by Indian companies versus global giants? Maybe as a percentage of the turnover, are we in line with the big boys globally?
Oh, yes, we are. I think we are typically in line with the big boys right now. In fact, if you really talk about the R&D spends, I'll take it as R&D spends, at least in the pharmaceutical sectors or whatever. We are really looking at it. But at the country level, we are not really spending a lot on innovation and R&D.
So selectively, some industries and some companies are, but not all of them.
Yes.
From Gurgaon, there's a question, but there's a person without a name. Can pricing innovations destroy value for shareholders? Example, airline industry, Air Deccan or Kingfisher, and what does China does provide goods to the world at low prices? Well, 2 parts. Pricing innovation may or may not, because there's also always an element of business success which is built in, and I'm sure Dr. Kapoor will agree. So when you talk about innovations, there is an element of success that you have to build in. If it's successful, it will not destroy value. It will actually create a lot of value. If it's innovation which is not thought out as a complete part of business strategy, it can of course destroy value. Let's take up. Is there another question? Okay. There's a question from Jamshedpur. Shakti Shankar from Jamshedpur. Innovation can dump others out of competition. Which will call the blue ocean strategy?
In fact, no, I'll not say innovation can dump others out of competition. I think blue ocean strategy is more about finding new market spaces or newer markets or new market segments or going to your non-customers. So it's not about dumping your competition. It's just about really going to the fundamentally newer market for creating value for yourself. So it's not dumping competition and so on and so forth.
Murugan from Chennai has a question again on your program. Is the 2-day campus visit that you talked about, or the 2-day class session that you talked about with a physical presence, is it a must for the completion of your course?
In fact, I would suggest that you should come for this 2-day interaction. It's an optional module that you have, but then if you really want to take the full benefit of the course, you should come for this module. But you still will have a lot of learning without even being part of the thing.
But it would help, it would integrate a lot of learning that has come through in the program, because you'll be doing a lot of diverse things, and I think the way it has been talked about, it will give you a chance to test out the various things that you have been taught. So you can try it out, see how it actually works in terms of business results before you go out, and that will be a very important part of this physical interaction. All right. Shrikant from Bombay has a question of product irregularity. Shrikant, you've not spelled it out, so we can't take it up. Sachin from Pune, Dr. Kapoor requests your email ID. Would you want to share that?
Yeah, sure. You can always write to me. My email ID is amit@amitkapoor.com.
So we're putting it right here, Dr. Kapoor's email ID. amit@amitkapoor.com. So as sweet and as simple as it gets. Interesting, those of you who are interested in knowing more about the course or trying to sign up for that particular program, on your terminals you'll probably find a file and folder which has the relevant details and your application form. You may choose to do it right there should you so desire. Okay, from Nehru Place, Delhi, there's a question. There's a question from Pavneet Singh. In this changing phase of doing business through the internet, do we have some topics on discussion during the curriculum for e-commerce and e-business?
Absolutely. We are actually going to talk about cases like Yahoo. We are going to talk about cases like Dell, who actually used a lot of internet paradigms and so on and so forth for really creating a lot of success. So we are really going to have a lot of examples from the internet. We are really going to have a lot of examples from e-commerce, and we would actually be doing some sets of caselets also, which are going to be given to you as part of the course pack.
So clearly, there's a lot of updated material, things which are contemporary and very relevant, which is going to be used by Dr. Kapoor there. Okay, shall we see what come down? We'll take the last few questions. We may not be able to. Any program innovating the mind of recently elected MPs for the benefit of India? Well, we'll leave that out for the moment. Rashmi, good thought. And from Chennai, Murugan signs off. Thank you, Amit, for a session.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And any other questions? We are running out of time, so I'll take the last couple of questions. Mumbai, there's a question. How many cases will you do in a day during the course?
I think typically not more than 2 in any case.
Not more than 2 in any case, but 2 fat juicy cases may still require a fair amount of reading and understanding.
Yes.
So that's the answer to the gentleman from Bombay. Will there be any case studies on the service industry, banking and insurance specific?
I think yes. We are going to have one case on the insurance industry. One case.
Okay, and then let's move on. Come further down. Okay. Are there any other queries? Thank you, gentlemen. I think we are coming to the end of our program. We are coming to the end of our time. Maybe there are a few questions which have remained unanswered. We are sorry we will not be able to take it up at this particular module. This is the first time we've had the privilege of having had Dr. Amit Kapoor here over NIT Imperia to have a nationwide seminar where there have been people from about 20 centers. We've had approximately 160 of you participating, and there have been about 60 questions that we have picked up, and there are at least 15 or 20 more that we haven't been able to justice to. We seek your pardon on that particular front. But those of you who found it stimulating, those of you who found it exciting and look forward to exploring this world of strategy a lot deeper, a lot better, and to debate the criticalities which affect life in these uncertain times for us, perhaps you might be interested in knowing more and taking up the 3-month advanced program on competitive strategy, which will be offered by Dr. Amit Kapoor. Dr. Kapoor, I must thank you for a very engaging and a very stimulating session. It has been our delight, as well as of all our audience all over, to have you here, and they've interacted. All the questions have come forward. Thank you so much.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for having joined us for this seminar.
Thank you.
Welcome to NIT at MDI program on corporate strategy. In fact, it's an immense pleasure for me to actually welcome all of you to exchange some ideas on what this program is going to be all about and what we are really planning to do. In fact, this is the first initiative that NIT Imperia and MDI are actually going to do, and I expect this to be an exceptional program which is actually going to give you a different experience on a unique platform of NIT Imperia. Before I actually start with the program, I must actually share some thoughts about who I am and what I actually do. I am Professor Amit Kapoor from MDI Gurgaon. I am Professor of Strategy and Industrial Economics at MDI, and I am actually heading the Institute for Competitiveness in India as the honorary chairman. The institute works in the area of understanding competitiveness of nations and industries in the country, and I actually work with a professor out of Harvard Business School called Professor Michael V. Porter, who's supposed to be the guru of strategy. And I've been working with him for the last 5 years in this area, and we've really worked together in the area of competitiveness. By virtue of working with a professor from Harvard and by virtue of working with a guru of strategy, I believe that I can actually give something very interesting to you. If we really look at what we are really trying to do, there are multiple sets of things that we are really trying to do within this program. And at this juncture, when we are really seeing globalization happen, we are seeing a huge level of turmoil in the economy happening. I fundamentally believe that strategy takes a center stage for any organization. Strategy takes a center stage for a simple reason, because this gives you a unique perspective to how to actually do business. Very interestingly, if you really look at what do you call as strategy, from my point of view, strategy is about fundamentally understanding 4 things, and this program is actually going to talk about these 4 things. In fact, strategy is about competition, strategy is about context, strategy is about customers, and strategy is about customers. In fact, if you really look at it, these are all 4 aspects which we are actually going to touch in the program, and we are actually going to integrate this whole thought of various sets of ideas that you might have actually developed at your workplace over a period of time. If we really look at the journey of the program, it's going to be fairly intense. It's going to be a case-based pedagogy. In fact, there are very many ways in which, like, business schools across the world or business schools in India talk about strategy. They would actually give a lecture or whatever. But from my point of view, strategy is about doing things hands-on, and that